In this video, I want to talk about another way of thinking about the New Deal. Roosevelt had many critics. To conservatives, he was at best a kind of reckless experimenter. If you're a little bit further to the right, you might have even thought that he was a socialist or perhaps even a dangerous communist. If you were a person on the left, you were often dissatisfied with Roosevelt. You thought he was too cautious, maybe even a flunky for big business. Roosevelt was neither a man of the extreme right nor a man of the extreme left. And a way to get around this is to think of the concept of countervailing forces. And forces is a pretty simple idea. It's just that if you have one force, you need an opposite force to balance it out. It's the same kind of idea that we have embedded in the Constitution with our checks and balances system. So in the most, I suppose, easy to grasp example of this, Roosevelt believed that big business had become too powerful, even arrogant. A lot of what Roosevelt did was this idea of the countervailing force. You try to balance one thing off against another. If you think about it, the Federal Reserve Board is a kind of countervailing force to banks. Federal agricultural boards is a countervailing force to corporate agriculture and corporate farms. Labor laws are a countervailing force to big business. Insurance programs are countervailing forces to economic cycles, and so on and so forth. He is often accused of being a Keynesian economist. Yes and no. He had Keynesian ideas involved in what he did as president, but he was never a pure Keynesian either. The idea of balancing one thing off against another. It's a very, very interesting way of looking at New Deal. Now, like all models, it has its disadvantages. This particular model is a binary. It sees that there are two things that are in contrast to one another, perhaps even in conflict to one another. Sometimes in life, things are much more complex than that. You might, in some circumstances, for example, have two clashing forces that decide to become allies to clash against a third force. A common example of this would be that in some cases, for example, labor unions might ally with business over questions of, say, pollution. Obviously, business doesn't want to put in a lot of pollution controls because it's expensive for them. Business might convince labor unions that if they have to put in a lot of expensive pollution control devices, it will cost union jobs. And unions might say, well, we'll cooperate with business on this and we'll gang up against environmentalists because we want to save union jobs. Okay, so sometimes things are more complex than a binary system of forces and countervailing forces, but it's nonetheless a very interesting way of thinking about the New Deal.